My name is Stewart Copeland, and strangely, I began life as the son of the CIA man in Beirut, Lebanon. His name was Miles Axe Copeland Jr. from Birmingham, Alabama. It never occurred to me, as a kid, to ask, what are we doing living here in Beirut? To me, my father was a jazz musician who threw a lot of cocktail parties. The real job of my spy dad was installing and maintaining a system of scoundrels, sultans, kings, and cutthroats to keep the Arabic oil flowing to us. My father was an engineer of the invisible empire of the United States of America. By today's morals, of course, he was a scoundrel himself, although long past. But by the ever-rising moral standards of today, so was George Washington and every other patriot who built us up from colony to theoretical flagship of the free world. In the 60s, my father's good chum Kim Philby of the British MI5 absconded to the Soviet Union just ahead of getting busted as a double agent for the Russians. His son, my friend Harry Philby, was devastated. His father had just disappeared forever from his life. My father also was, like many public servants, eventually tempted away from Uncle Sam, but only by bigger paychecks to do the same job for private enterprise, namely the big American oil companies. When he retired to bucolic Oxfordshire in England, he began collecting his impressions of the time and how the birth of Israel changed everything. What follows is an extract from my father's notes about his nefarious adventures at the dawn of the modern Middle East. We used to think that these stories were just Dad at the dinner table, but this one is true, verified history, and the characters named are real people. This piece is titled The Raid, Damascus, Syria, 1949. It seems to start in mid-sentence, and I can still hear his Alabama drawl. It all began with Joseph, the embassy telephone operator, who doubled as a spy. And I mean doubled in the technical sense, as well as the usual. For he spied on the embassy for the Syrians, and spied on the Syrians for the embassy, and was therefore an example of the classic double agent of the Mata Hari tradition. He was, it happened, an early recruit of one Fakhri Baroudi, an old Syrian grandee and good friend of mine, who divided his time between coaching a choir of delinquent teenagers and directing the Syrian espionage and counter-espionage service for President Shukri Kowatli. Despite our friendship, Fakhri suspected me of having duties rather beyond those implied by my title, Assistant Cultural Attaché. This American, he secretly said to Joseph, whose entire cultural background consists of playing cornet in a corrupt capitalist New Orleans jazz band, presumes to teach culture to the oldest civilized country on earth. But it was not so much my brash presumption that bothered Fakhri as the observable extent of my movements. Why is it that these army officers are so interested in the American cultural attaché? Noting that the Syrian officers, who trooped to my Thursday night drinking parties, outnumbered the poets, novelists, college professors, and other intellectuals at a ratio of about 5-1. When the Syrian army entered the war against Israel in May 1948, Steve Meade and I went along to the front as guests of one Colonel Husni Zayim, commander of the largest of its 3 regiments. Fakhri was immediately suspicious, not of the Israelis, but of us sneaky Americans. "This is the straw that has broken the camel's back," Fakhri exclaimed to Joseph in one of their late-night debriefing sessions, speaking in his high-flown classical Arabic. Lapsing into the vernacular, he then instructed Joseph that thenceforth he was to monitor all of my telephone calls, and to assume direction of the 2 native secretaries who had until then done their spying individually under the supervision of a headquarters case officer. Thereafter, the team of 3 Syrian agents would coordinate their activities so that, under the senior Joseph, all of the eavesdropping, telephone tapping, and periodic searching of my desk drawers, which helpfully I always left unlocked, and rifling of my waste paper basket would add up to what we in the espionage business call total coverage. Joseph, of course, reported this new development promptly, pointing out that since Fakhri had given him 50% raise in salary, we should do likewise. To sustain my neutrality, he said. Here I must digress to explain that, so far as we can tell, most native employees recruited by local intelligence services to spy on American diplomatic installations are, in reality, working for the CIA. Although the local services have more to offer by way of negative inducements, for example bodily harm, the CIA pays better and offers better retirement benefits, including in many cases restrictions-free visas to emigrate to the United States. Joseph, for example, is now a naturalized American citizen, growing oranges in California. Moreover, CIA station chiefs and case officers make it their practice to furnish their double agents with just the kind of disinformation that it takes to keep their opposite numbers happy. For example, Joseph used to tell me, old Fakhri Bey wouldn't rumble me even if he saw through our little agreement. He would be giving up his best agent. It's what we give him that keeps President Coatli happy. So now I had 3 of Fakhri's spies to supply with chicken feed, as we used to call the disinformation materials, whose primary purpose is to keep the local service so fully occupied as to have no time left over for more inconveniencing pursuits. If this weren't problem enough, there was the fact that Fakhri and his boss, the president, weren't satisfied with the truth. Simply that Meade, myself, and the other embassy officers were engaged in normal, business-as-usual diplomatic performance. The real cultural attaché, for example, was engaged, to the exclusion of all other interests, in a chess-by-mail tournament with the other chess aficionados on the diplomatic courier route. The developing war with Israel made them hungry for more satisfying stuff, such as the inside story on what I was doing while in contact with all those highly impressionable and no doubt corruptible Syrian army officers. It was about this time that our favorite regimental commander, Husni Zayem, was transferred back to Damascus and made chief of staff of all Syrian armed forces. In the course of a small drinking party during his first week back in Damascus, he revealed to Steve and me an ambition that he had been nursing ever since the failure of his regiment's single battle with Israeli forces, won by the Israelis by the simple process of sending across an emissary with a white flag and enough money to buy all the Syrians' weapons. And then Husni confessed that he had actively tried to realize it. "You know," he said in his fractured French, "if I had a bit of backing, I could clean up this place, take it over, and then give you that peace arrangement that you want us to have with Israel." "Very interesting," we said.